friends, we are back, and let's see, we covered the basics here of how everything came to be and started. We got Adam and Eve covered, and what's going on there in the garden. We covered Noah. Now we're going to get into briefly the Tower of Babel. The more important thing, though, is really it's the origin of the different languages that are on the planet. And we have the origin, a couple of interesting origins beyond the origin of the earth and all the wildlife and everything in it. As far as people go, we have the origin of why people feel the need to wear clothing and why it's shameful to be naked. No one, with all the atheists that I've argued to, I actually do have a video on this about where did clothing come from. And no one can really has a good answer. They say, well, people run around naked now, and there's one tribe called the Zindu with about 1,000 people in it, and that's kind of their deal. And it's like, well, so what? We have nude beaches too. As a general rule, we need to wear clothing. I'd feel kind of strange going to my auto mechanic and he's sitting there naked, asking me if I need my oil changed. No, I don't want to deal with that. So we covered that, the origin of clothing. That's where that one has to do with the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And now we're coming to the origin of languages. Our languages are very complex. Even though some remote tribes don't even have a written language, they still have a spoken language that's completely different than anyone else's dialect. How would evolution explain people each developing their own unique dialect that means the different words for meaning the exact same thing from all these different remote groups of people? And the Bible answers that very briefly, actually, in the Tower of Babel. So what's going on here with the Tower of Babel? First, we have Shem, Ham, Japheth are setting up they're doing their own groups. I guess they all split up, and that's how the nations are divided. We'll get into Scripture. We're going to start with Scripture, Genesis 10, and then Genesis 11 is where we talk about Nimrod and the Tower of Babel. So as we see here, Genesis 10, verse 8, Cush, who is the son of Ham, is the son of Noah, beget Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. So he had great renown with the people, as he was the first rock star, you'd say, the first kind of rock star guy. And he was also powerful. He was a king, and he ruled over the land of Shinar, I believe. Pretty sure. The land of Shinar. So that's what he has his setup going on there. And the people are kind of spread out, but they are all of one tongue. Everyone can understand each other naturally. They're speaking whatever Noah spoke. Whatever language was the original language. Not positive on that. And then we're going to skip all the way down. These are genealogies of the different sons to verse 32. And it summarizes, it says, these are the families of the sons of Noah after their generations in their nations, and by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. So each of these brothers went out, their tribes probably at that point, and they all dwelled in different areas. Now I also want to say that some people use this as a sort of a race thing, where they want to put the races into different categories of they're a Hamite, so they got to be this color, or they're a Shemite, and they got to be this color. Well, Shem, Ham, and Japheth probably look like their mom and dad, Noah and his wife. And the children of Shem, Ham, and Japheth probably look like the parents and the wife. And as they divided up, those characteristics over time go down to what would become the races today. But they weren't divided over their skin color. Racism is a thing that is, there is no, I'll just say this. There is no legitimate Christian pastor that is going to justify racism using the Bible today. For people today. Now in the Old Testament, the only thing that I am aware of is the Jews weren't supposed to intermingle with, for instance, the Canaanites and some of these other tribes because of how wicked they are and because of their idol worship was the primary thing. It was because of the belief systems you can't marry into that. And that got them into trouble many a times. However, when the Jews did take over a place, they would slaughter the men, but leave women and children, and they would make slaves or servants out of them or whatever. And I'm assuming those people would be more or less sort of integrated into their society. For instance, Abraham had an Egyptian sort of helper, Hagar. Now, she wasn't taken, as far as we know, in any sort of military act or anything like that, but we have things like that going on. There is no real division of race. It's pretty hard to... The ones who want to do that have to try really hard, and they have to go back to what I was saying about Cain having the mark. So Cain got black skin or something. That was the mark. Well, that's lying. That the Bible does not say that. It doesn't say it at all. Or Canaan. If you really want to be mad at a race, you say they're Canaanites. There's nothing about that in the Bible having to do with the color of their skin. The Bible never mentions color of skin. It mentions the area that the people dwell in. And as we know, people move from place to place. So who knows what color the people are. Doesn't matter. I'd imagine at this time, people probably look pretty much the same. This is only like 3 generations off of Noah by the time we get here to Nimrod. So we're going to go to Genesis chapter 11. This is the Tower of Babel story. Quite simply. Genesis 11 verse 1. And the whole earth was of one language and one speech. Now the people are divided up and they have their own territories. Who knows how far they're spread out, but they all still have the same language. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar. That's where Nimrod set up shop. And that's where they dwelt. So they journeyed westward. Where all these different groups were they started somewhere in the east. When Noah's boat landed, and they're set up shop, and they're gradually migrating west. And they said to one another, Go, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly, and had brick for stone, and slime they had for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city, a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. So they're setting up a world government, sort of. You could sort of say that. Each individual tribe from Shem, Ham, and Japheth and their children spread out. And what it appears to have happened here is Nimrod. Everyone heard of Nimrod, according to the Bible. Everyone knows he's a big shot. And he's a king in the land of Shinar. And he gets this idea, supposedly, the Bible doesn't say it was him, but it's his land. He had to approve it, that they're going to build this tower. What the motivation was when they got to heaven, we don't really know. There are some that say they wanted to take over heaven and have war with God. Well, we don't really know. But what was happening is the people had a commandment. Noah had a commandment, is to go be fruitful and multiply and spread all over the earth, was the commandment. Because everyone had the same speech, you have this rumor of they're building a really big tower. They're building a really big tower. They're going to go to heaven. Well, maybe they just wanted to be with God. We don't know. And so people journeyed westward to the land of Shinar to see what was going on. And as the tower grew, people would go over there and see what's going on and go help out and say, wow, isn't this amazing what we're doing all together, all in this thing? And God didn't like that. He wanted the people to spread out and have their own deal going. Okay, he wanted people to be separated. And the Lord came down, which is also used as a justification now by some people out there. You're going to watch out for that. Where now it's, you got to be separate from races. Again, this has nothing to do with race at all. Nothing. And the Lord came down to see the city and tower which the children of man builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Nothing will be restrained from them which they imagine to do. You look, you call it a dictatorship, maybe. Where if you have a leader and everyone comes together, it's going to be behind one guy who says, let's do this. And maybe if it's not that great of a thing, everyone's going to follow it anyway. But God's outside of time, and he can see what the result of this would be. And he says, no, let us divide the languages, where we have a little bit of a communication barrier and people can grow on their own without growing through one celebrity like Nimrod and doing what Nimrod wants to do. That's what I see in that. Let us go down and confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. It says nothing about race there, or skin color, or anything. Confounded the people's language. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound their language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon all the face of the earth. These are the generations of Shem, yada, yada, yada. So, you can look back into history and come back to just a couple basic languages. How many languages did he change? I have no idea. But Spanish sounds like just about everything. You know, Spanish is very close to a lot of languages. It's one of the easiest ones to pick up for most people. I'm not sure how if they are spread by Japheth's offspring spoke this, Ham spoke this, Shem spoke that. We don't really know how far they were confounded, but they were confounded. But everyone still retained their knowledge of language and what words stood for what, and that would make sense looking at modern day languages today. Now what's happening today, to let you know we're coming to the end times, is that there is no more language barrier at all. Ever since the internet, there's really, Google Translate didn't come out that much farther beyond that, where you can go to any website in the world, and if it's written in Chinese, you click Google Translate and you can read it in your own language. The Bible is available in almost every language out there, the King James Bible. So we're coming to a point in time where we are all of one language. We're coming to a point in time where we're going to have one world government. And I think what was going on here with the Tower of Babel is essentially the setup of the first, what would be the one world government. And God said, no, it's too soon for that. Ain't having that yet. Not going to do it. And right after this happens, God sets up his plan with Abraham, which will be the next thing that we talk about. With that, we will see you later.